Don't know if it was my
Grandma's touch
of mine.
Grandma's mine.
You know, maybe you were never brought up in my grandma's time, but I sure wish I could go back to those days and times. Now, I don't know if it was my grandma's touch or my
Grandma's smile.
You know, maybe because I was looking through a little boy's eye, but I sure thought things were better than they seem to be now. How in the world? How, Lord?
Hi again, and welcome to my Something to Live By clips. Today, I want to talk to you very briefly, coming from 1 Peter chapter 4. And the title that we're going to focus on today is pretty much, Go Ahead and Talk About Me Then. And the reason why I want to focus on that title is because when you become a child of God and you become a Christian, many times the way you live is going to be different from the people that you live around and you used to associate with. And I'm telling you, you don't have to space yourself out from your friends. Just the fact that you start living differently from the way they live, they will space themselves out from you. And what's going to happen sometimes is that these same people who are, quote, your friends, are going to be the very same ones who begin to talk about you and run you down. And what they'll start doing is they'll start bringing up stuff that you've done in your past to try to make you look bad. It doesn't work with me, and I hope it doesn't work with you. It didn't work with Paul, and it didn't work with many people in the Bible. Because the thing about it is, your past is not who you are now. Because as a child of God, God has created a new creature, a new creation, somebody who is different than who they used to be in the past. So as I've heard a lot of preachers say, I may not be who I should be, but I definitely am not who I used to be. And that's what you got to focus on. And you know something, this is not anything new. This is something that's been going on for a long time, that people who try to live right and try to do the right thing, they're maligned and talked about those people who don't want to do the right thing. And so Peter talks about this in 1 Peter chapter 4, and we're going to start reading at verse number 1 and just make a few comments about the passage. Peter says, "Therefore, since Christ has suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves also with the same purpose, because he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, so as to live the rest of the time in the flesh, no longer for the lust of men, but for the will of God." And that's the purpose of your life if you're a child of God. The purpose of your life should be living for God, and not living for the people around you, not even living for yourself, but living for God. Because if you're living for God, then what the people around you think doesn't matter. In verse 3 he says, "For the time," notice, "has already passed, is sufficient for you to have carried out the desires of the Gentiles." Basically what he's saying, the time has already passed in which you live like these Gentiles and these people who are running to and fro to do everything they want to do in their lives. And he names some things. He says, you used to course in sensuality, in lust, in drunkenness, and carousing, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries. You used to do these things, but you stopped. You don't do these things anymore. And so in verse 4 he says, "And in all of this, they're surprised that you do not run with them in the same excesses of dissipation, and they malign you." You know what that means? When they look at you and see that you do not do the things that you used to do, they say, "Oh, you think you too good to be around us. You think you too much. You think you're too holy to be with us anymore." And they begin to talk about you, they begin to dog you out, and they begin to call you every name under the sun but a child of God. And you know what? It has nothing to do with you thinking that you're better than them. It has nothing to do with that on the period. As a matter of fact, a person trying to live for God is to not, he or she is not the one who ever brings that up anyway. It's always somebody else. This has nothing to do with nobody thinking they're better than somebody else. This just has something to do with that person who is trying to live right, realizing that they want to give their lives to God and do the right thing now. And all because I want to do the right thing, you're going to criticize me and you're going to talk about me because I want to do the right thing? Well, you go right ahead. Peter goes on and say in verse number 5, but they will give account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. Let me tell you something. No matter what they say about you and no matter what they do to you, God is going to judge them. You just make sure you stay faithful to God and you don't give in and compromise because you're afraid of what they're going to say about you. In verse number 5, he says Jesus is going to judge the living and the dead. So I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you that in your life, as long as you're doing the right thing to the best of your ability, you don't have to look down upon people, which I'm sure you don't do that anyway. And don't you let anybody make you feel like you do that way. You keep living for God the best you can. And if somebody want to talk about you because you're doing the right thing, think about what they did to Jesus. He did the right thing, and they not only talked about him, but they killed him. At least we can suffer a few comments every now and then, and a little slander every now and then, all for the sake of Christ. So I want to encourage you, fight the good fight of the faith. Don't you give up. Do not give up. And if somebody want to talk about you, hey, all you can do is say, go ahead and talk about me then, because I've dedicated my life to God, and he is the one I'm going to live for. That's a challenge for me. A little something to live by. God bless you.
You know, maybe you were brought up in my grandma's time, but I sure wish I could go back to those days and times. Now, I don't know if it was my grandma's touch or my grandma's smile. You know, maybe because I was looking through a little boy's eyes, but I sure thought things were better than they seem to be now. How in the world?